Chapter 32. Well, when I got there, it was all still and Sunday-like and hot and sunshiny. The hands was gone to the fields, and there was them kind of faint dronings of bugs and flies in the air that makes it seem so lonesome and like everybody's dead and gone. And if a breeze fans along and quivers the leaves, it makes you feel mournful, 'cause it's like your spirits whispering. Spirits that's been dead ever so many years, and you always think they're talking about you. As a general thing, it makes the body wish he was dead too, and done with it all. Well, Phelps's was one of those little one-horse cotton plantations, and they all look alike. A rail fence around a 2-acre yard, a stile made out of logs sawed off and upended, and steps, like barrels of a different length, to climb over the fence with, and for the women to stand on when they're going to jump onto a horse. Some sickly grass patches on the big yard, but mostly it was bare and smooth, like that of an old top hat nap rubbed off. Big double log house for the white folks, hewed logs with the chinks stopped up in mud and mortar, and these mud stripes been whitewashed some time or another. Brown log kitchen with the big broad open but roof passages joining into the house. Log smokehouse back of the kitchen. 3 little log cabins in a row to the other side of the smokehouse, and 1 little hut all by itself against the back fence, and some outbuildings down a piece the other side. An ash hopper with a big kettle to boil soap in, and the little hut bench by the kitchen door with a bucket of water and gourd. Hounds asleep there in the sun. More hounds asleep round about. About 3 shade trees off by a corner, some currant bushes and gooseberry bushes in one place by the fence. Outside the fence, a garden and a watermelon patch. And then the cotton fields begins, and after the fields, the woods. I went around and clumb over the back stile to the ash hopper and started for the kitchen. When I got a little ways, I heard the dim hum of a spinning wheel wailing along and sinking along again. And then I knowed for certain I wished I was dead, for that is the lonesomest sound in the whole world. Well, I went right along, not fixing up any particular plan, just trusting to Providence to put the right words in my mouth when the time come. For I'd noticed that Providence always did put the right words in my mouth, if I felt it or if I left it alone. When I got halfway, first one hound and then another got up and went for me, and of course I stopped and faced them and kept still. And such another powwow as they made. In a quarter of a minute, I was kind of a hub of a wheel, as you may say, spokes made out of dogs. A circle of 15 of them packed together around me, with their necks and noses stretched upwards of me, and barking and howling, and more coming. Well, you could see them sailing over fences and around corners from everywheres. Wella come out and tearing off the kitchen with a rolling pin in her hand, singing out, "Begone, you, Tat, you Spot, begone, sah!" And she fetched first one and then another, and clipped and sent 'em howling, and then the rest followed, and the next second half of them come back, wagging their tails around me and making friends with me. There ain't no harm in a hound, nohow. And behind the woman comes a little girl and 2 little boys, well, in anything but toe linen shirts, and they hung on to their mother's gown and peeped out from behind her at me, bashful, the way they always do. And here comes the white woman, running from the house, about 45 or 50 years old, bareheaded, and her spinning stick in her hand. And behind her comes the little white children, acting the same way as the little was doing. She was all smiling all over, and so she could hardly stand, and she says, "It's you, at last, ain't it?" Well, I out with a yes'm before I thought. Well, she grabbed me and hugged me tight, and then she gripped me by both hands and shook, and the tears come in her eyes and run down over. Well, she couldn't seem to hug and shake enough, and kept saying, "You don't look as much like your mother as I reckoned you would, but law sakes, I don't care for that. I'm so glad to see you. Dear, dear, it does seem like I could eat you up. Children, it's your cousin Tom. Tell him howdy." But they ducked their heads, and they put their fingers in their mouths and hid behind her. So she runs on. "Lize, hurry up and get him a hot breakfast right away, or did you get your breakfast on the boat?" Well, I said I got it on the boat. So then she started from the house, leading me by hand, and the children tagging after. Well, when we got there, and she set me down in a split-bottom chair and set herself down in a little low stool in front of me, holding both my hands, and says, "Now, I can have a good look at you. And laws of me, I've been hungry for it many, many a time all these long years, and it's come at last. We've been expecting you a couple days and more. What's kept you? The boat get agrounded?" Yes'm, she..." "Well, don't say yes'm. Say Aunt Sally. Oh, where'd you get aground?" Well, I didn't rightly know what to say, because I didn't know whether the boat would be coming up the river or down. But I go a good deal on instinct, and my instinct said that she'd be coming up, from down towards Orleans. Well, that didn't help me much, though, for I didn't know the names of bars down that way. Well, I see I got to Inventivar, forget the name of the one that we go around in honor. Now I struck an idea and I fetched it out. Well, it warn't the grounding. That didn't keep us back a little. We blowed out a cylinder head. Good gracious! Anybody hurt? No, it killed a. Well, it's lucky, because sometimes people do get hurt. 2 years ago, last Christmas, your Uncle Silas was coming up from New Orleans on the old lady Rook, and Lolly Rook, and she blowed out a cylinder head and crippled a man, and I think he died afterwards. He was a Baptist. Your Uncle Silas knowed a family in Baton Rouge, and knowed his people very well. Yes, I remember now, he did die. Mortification set in, and they had to amputate him. But it didn't save him. Yes, it was mortification, and that's it. He turned blue all over and died in the hope of a glorious resurrection. Well, they said he was a sight to look at. Your uncle's been uptown every day to fetch you, and he's gone again, and not more an hour ago he said he'll be back any minute. You must have met him on the road, didn't you? An oldish man with a... No, I didn't see anybody, Aunt Sally. The boat landed just at daylight, and I left my baggage on the wharf boat and went looking around town for out a piece in the country to put in time to not get here too soon. And so I come by the back way. Well, who'd you give your baggage to? Well, nobody. Why, child, it'll be stole. Well, not where I hid it, I reckon it won't, I says. Well, how'd you get your breakfast so early on the boat? Well, it was kind of thin ice, I said. Well, the captain I see me standing around and told me I better have something to eat before I went ashore. So I took in the Texas and to the officers' lunch, and he gave me all I wanted. Well, I was getting so uneasy, I couldn't listen good. I had my mind on the children all the time. I wanted to get them out to one side and pump them a little and find out who I was. But I couldn't get no show. Mrs. Phelps kept it up, and so on and so on. Now, pretty soon she made the cold chills streak all down my neck, or all down my back, because she says, but here we're running on this way, and you ain't told me a word about Sis, nor any of them. Now, I'll rest my works a little, and you start up yourn. Just tell me everything. Tell 'em all about 'em all. Every one of 'em, and how they are, and what they're doing, and what they told you to tell me, and every last thing you could think of. Well, I see I was up a stump, and up it good. Providence had stood me this far, all right, but it was hard and tight around now. I see it warn't but use to try and go ahead. I got to throw up my hand, so I says to myself, here's another place where I got to risk the truth. I opened my mouth to begin, but she grabbed me and hustled me in behind the bed and says, here it comes. Stick your head down lower. There, that'll do. Now you can't see him now. Don't let on your hair. I'll play a joke on him. Children, you don't say a word. I see I was in a fix now, but it warn't no use to worry. There warn't nothing to do but just sit hold still and try to be ready and stand from under when the lightning struck. I just had one little glimpse of the old gentleman when he come in the bed and hit him. Mrs. Phelps, she jumps for him and says, has he come? No, says her husband. Goodness gracious, she says. What in the world can have become of him? I can't imagine, says the old gentleman, and I must say it makes me dreadful uneasy. Uneasy, she says. I'm ready to go distracted. He must come, and you must have missed him along the road. I know it so. Something tells me so. Why, Sally, I couldn't have missed him along the road. You know that. But, oh, dear, dear, what will Sis say? He must have come. You must have missed him. Oh, don't distress me any more than I'm already distressed. I don't know what in the world I'm going to make of it. I'm at my wit's end, and I don't mind acknowledging I'm right down scared. But there's no hope that he's come, for he wouldn't have come if he wouldn't come and me miss him. Sally, it's terrible, just terrible. Something's happened to that boat, sure. Ellie sprung to the window Why, Silas, look yonder, up the road. Ain't that somebody coming? Well, he sprung to the window and headed the bed, and that gave Mrs. Phelps the chance she wanted. She stooped down quick at the foot of the bed and give me a pull, and out I come. And when he turned back from the window, there she stood, a beaming and smiling like a house afire, and standing pretty meek and sweaty alongside. The old gentleman stared and says, why, who's that? Well, who do you reckon it is? I ain't no idea. Who is it? It's Tom Sawyer. By James, I almost slumped through the floor. But there won't no time to swap knives. The old man grabbed me by the hand and shook it and kept on shaking all the time, and how the women did dance and laugh and cry, and then how they both did fire off questions about Sid and Mary, the rest of the tribe. But if they was joyful, it warn't nothing what I was, for it was like being born again. I was so glad to find out who I was. Well, they froze to me for 2 hours. At last, when my chin was so tired I couldn't hardly go any more, I told them more about my family. Well, I mean the Sawyer family. That never happened to any six Sawyer families. And I explained all about how we blowed a cylinder head in the mouth of the White River and it took us 3 days to fix it, which was all right and worked first rate because they didn't know, but it would, but it, but what it would take 3 days to fix it. If I'd called it a bolt head, it would have done just as well. Now, I was feeling pretty comfortable all down one side and pretty uncomfortable all up the other. Being Tom Sawyer was easy and comfortable, and it stayed easy and comfortable till by and by I hear a steamboat coughing along down the river, and I says to myself, suppose Tom Sawyer does come down on that boat, and suppose he steps in here any minute and sings out my name before I can throw out a wink to keep it quiet. Well, I couldn't have it that way. It wouldn't do at all. I must go up the road and waylay him. So I told the folks I'd reckon I'd go up to the town and fetch down my baggage. The old gentleman was for going along with me, but I said no. I could drive the horse myself, and I'd rather he'd take no trouble about me.